Chapter 7 today of Nim's Island. As you can see, I have Eddie here, sleeping as usual. Chance is over on the other couch. Not sure how much they're going to be listening because they both seem to be napping. So hopefully you guys are listening closely because Nim, she comes into some trouble today. Let's see what happens. From the top of Fire Mountain, you could feel like a frigate bird floating strong in the winds and seeing everywhere you wanted to see. You could see the island's shores and beaches and the grasslands and the cliffs and the rocks and the forest. You could see far, far over the sea every way that is rolled to the ends of the earth. Early next morning, Nim whistled for Fred and hugged Selkie goodbye. "I'll be careful," she promised. Then she checked that her spyglass was around her neck. She would need it to look for Jack. She dropped a notebook and pencil in her pocket to write things down for Alex and packed 2 bananas, a piece of coconut, a pancake bread, and her bamboo cup into her backpack for a picnic along the way. And off she set to climb Fire Mountain. She stopped at the pool to fill her cup and shoved her bamboo lid back on tight, climbed up past the top of the waterfall, following the creek through the tangling vines and fly-munching flowers. The air steamed and sweat dribbled. "Get down and walk, Fred," said Nim. But Fred liked being carried and sprayed a cool saltwater sneeze across her neck. "Okay," she said, "but we'll stop for a rest." The creek was shallow and warm, but they flopped in, and it trickled over their hot bodies. Nim lay on her back and peeled a banana. Fred stared at the coconut. "Later," said Nim. Fred tried to sulk, but he was too hot to bother. They climbed higher, and the ground was gravelly and black. The plants were gray spikes, and the creek disappeared. Then there were no plants at all, just bubbling steam and the rotten egg smell of the hissing stones, but 100 times stronger. "Hee-you!" Nim coughed, and Fred sneezed a pathetic spray. Long, long ago, the top of Fire Mountain had been Round Green Peak. Then, one rumbling, earth-shaking day, it had poured out its heart of boiling lava, and it melted the green peak. Now the top of the mountain had a sharp gray point with a gray smoky crater yawning below. Nim wanted to look down into the crater, but the cloud of steam was too thick to see through, and it was choking her breath. And the longer she stood on the rocks, the hotter they got. So she had to hop on one foot and then on the other, and then she had to run out of the smoke and away from the top of the mountain. She sat down, and Fred climbed off her shoulders, and they both took a deep breath. "Picnic?" asked Nim. And they shared the coconut and the water. Then Nim ate her bread and the other banana and looked around. No matter which way or how far her eyeglass stared, the ocean was empty. There was no white sails or anything else that could be Jack's boat. Nothing but a bird winging steadily out of the western sea. "Maybe he'll bring me another message," thought Nim. But first she was going to be Alex's island eyes. Far below the top of Frigate Bird Cliff, then Turtle Beach, pale sands. Then there's the grasslands and Shell Beach and their hut, on to Sea Lion Point and Kehoe Cove, and finally the grim black lava rock that stretched all the way back to the far edge of the Frigate Bird Cliffs. The island was built in layers, Nim thought, beach and rock, grassland and rainforest, and last of all the rocky Fire Mountain cone. She picked up her notebook and pencil, but before she could start to write, the ground began to tremble. Then the earth roared and the mountain bellowed, and the explosion of red covered the sky. The fountain of lava, red and bubbling, shot up from the middle of the crater. Red and gold stars, hot and boiling, sprayed all over the mountaintop. It was like the wildest storm when wind and rain crash and great surf waves thunder, except the wind and the rain and the waves were all made of fire. Fred was a streak of gray flying over gray rocks. Nim's legs followed down as she ran as fast as she could for her life down the hot gravel cone. But the gravel was deep and crumbly, and Nim's foot twisted, and she rolled and skidded and tumbled down the mountain. She picked herself up and went on running, met Fred by the creek where they had done their first rest, and they splashed on through and ran some more. Nim's breath came in jagged chunks. She was so hot she thought flames might spurt out of her head like her own miniature volcano. And just when they couldn't run any further, they splashed into the waterfall's cold water and whooshed gently down into the pool. They sat for one refreshing moment and then ran the rest of the way back to the hut. Silkie was waiting anxiously on her rock. She barked when she saw them, sniffed Nim all over, and woofed sadly when she found the cut on her knee. It was a big messy cut with torn skin, deep gravel grooves, and lots of blood. Nim must have done it when she had tumbled down the mountain but had been too scared to feel it. It hurt now that she wasn't scared. Nim stretched out on the rock and let Selkie fuss. She stared up, and Fire Mountain was still shooting scarlet stars, a glow of red on the gray cone, but the lava hadn't followed them, and they were safe at home. She hadn't seen Jack's sails, so he wouldn't be coming home tonight, which meant there was one more thing she had to do. She took her fishing rod back to the rocks, and when she caught a fish, she dropped it in the bucket. because sometimes Galileo came when he was called and sometimes he didn't, but he always came for a fish. Dear Jack, today I climbed Fire Mountain to see if you were coming, but you weren't. I didn't do any science measurements or write anything down because the volcano erupted when we were at the top. If you think Fred can move fast for a coconut, you should see how fast he can run from an exploding volcano. I think I see Galileo now, so I'll say goodbye. Love, as much as Chica loves soccer, Nim. A frigate bird came closer, and it was Galileo. So Nim danced the fish in the air and called his name. Galileo swooped low and stayed long enough for her to pull out the letter that was tucked into his band and stick hers in it instead. Thank you, Nim called as the bird soared up into his nest by the cliffs, and she unrolled Jack's letter. Dear Nim, worked out the best way of fixing rudder is to drill hole through tip, not an easy underwater experience. Pass the rope through the hole and steer with the rope. I have drilled the hole, but had to jump out before I could get rope through it. Sharks all around here must have tasted the chunk I lost on my forehead in the storm. Though it was jaw-snapping yummy, they thought, and they wanted to chomp the rest. So as soon as they forget about me, I'll pass the rope through and be on my way home. But the storm blew me a long way, and it'll take a couple of days. Love, as much as sails love wind, Jack. Nim read the letter, and then she read it again. Even though Jack had tried to make it funny, she felt more lonely and miserable than she ever had before. Even writing a long, long email to Alex Rover all about Fire Mountain didn't make her feel better. Okay, so that was chapter 7, and as you can see, things are starting to happen, and we still don't know when Jack's going to be back, and Nim has a lot to take care of, so we'll see what happens in chapter 8. See you tomorrow. Bye.